Welcome to Learn English with Sara. Today I want to take you into a gentle, relatable story that explores how weather shapes our daily routines, our moods, and even the conversations we share with others. In this story, two friends, Sara and Mike, move through an ordinary day that slowly becomes a lesson in using natural English expressions about weather. As you listen, imagine yourself walking beside them, noticing the skies, the wind, the unexpected rain, and the way each moment becomes an opportunity to speak English with confidence. Sara woke up early in the morning at around 7:00 a.m., and the first thing she noticed was the soft gray light leaking through her curtains. The sky outside looked heavy, almost sleepy, and as she opened her window, a cold breeze brushed against her face. It made her feel instantly tired, the kind of tired that makes you want to pull the blanket over your head and drift back into sleep. She sighed, stood up slowly, and made her way to the kitchen for a warm cup of tea. Rainy days always made her feel a little slower, a little quieter inside. Later that morning, she stepped outside and walked to a small cafe where she planned to meet her friend Mike. The air smelled like wet pavement, and the clouds seemed to be gathering for another round of rain. When she reached the cafe, she found Mike already there, waving from a corner table. Unlike her, he looked cheerful and awake, sipping his warm drink with a bright smile. He asked how she was doing, and she admitted that the gloomy sky made her want to sleep more. Mike laughed gently, saying he understood completely. Weather always affected the way he felt too, except that sunny mornings made him immediately excited to start the day. Sara teased him for loving sunshine a little too much, and he teased her back for preferring cool, cloudy days. Their conversation drifted naturally into the topic of weather, how it shifts from sunny to cloudy, from warm to cold, and how people everywhere use weather to start small, friendly conversations. As they looked out the window, Sara noticed how the sky was turning even darker. She pointed it out, predicting it might rain soon. Mike nodded and said that weather could be unpredictable, changing from sunshine in the morning to sudden rain by lunchtime. He told her, "There's a phrase people use for this 4 seasons in one day." Sara laughed at how accurate that sounded, especially for a place where clouds and sunlight fought constantly for attention. Their conversation moved toward descriptions: sunny, cloudy, windy, rainy, and how simple these words were, yet how often they appeared in daily English. Mike explained that warm meant comfortable and pleasant, while hot meant uncomfortably high temperatures that made you want to jump into a pool. Sara added that freezing described extremely cold weather when you could almost see your breath. Talking through these words felt natural, as if they were walking through the seasons one by one. A few minutes later, the rain arrived, suddenly tapping hard against the cafe windows. People on the sidewalk rushed for shelter, some with umbrellas flipping inside out in the wind. Sara shook her head and said windy days were her least favorite because they made umbrellas useless. Mike laughed, agreeing that wind could make even a short walk frustrating. The rain grew heavier for a moment, almost pouring, and they remembered the funny English expression raining cats and dogs, which made both of them smile at its silliness. They shared memories of snow, although Sara rarely saw it where she lived. Mike described snow in his hometown, how magical it looked at first, how tiring it became after months of cold gray days. Sara imagined the white quietness he described, even though snow never stayed long in her city. When the rain finally softened, Sara looked outside and noticed the sky beginning to brighten again, as if changing its mind about the day. Mike mentioned checking the weather forecast each morning to decide whether he needed a jacket or an umbrella. Sara admitted she did the same, though forecasts were often wrong. Weather, she said, loved surprises. As they talked, the cafe grew livelier. People in wet jackets entered to escape the rain, shaking off drops of water and complaining with the kind of shared humor that only bad weather could create. Mike pointed out that weather was the easiest way to break the ice with strangers. You couldn't walk up to someone and ask for their life story, but you could always say something simple like, "Nice day, isn't it?" Or "This rain is unbelievable." Weather connected people even in small moments. They stayed there for another hour, sipping warm drinks and watching the skies shift again. Through their conversation, Sara realized how these simple descriptions, sunny, cloudy, warm, freezing, formed the foundation of everyday English. Weather was not just a topic, it was a bridge that helped people talk, share, and understand one another. As the rain faded into a soft drizzle, Sara and Mike decided to leave the cafe and take a short walk through the nearby park. The clouds still hung low, but the air felt fresher, as if the weather itself had taken a long breath. Small puddles sparkled on the ground, reflecting the shifting sky. Mike joked that this was perfect after rain weather, and Sara agreed. She enjoyed these moments when everything felt calm and clean, even if she preferred cloudy days over bright sunshine. As they walked, they continued talking about how weather influenced not just moods, but also everyday plans. Mike mentioned a weekend trip to the beach he was hoping to take, and Sara asked if he had checked the forecast. He nodded confidently, saying it was supposed to be warm and sunny all weekend, the perfect conditions for a beach trip. Sara smiled, teasing him again for being such a summer lover. Still, the idea of feeling warm sand under her feet sounded nice, and she told him she might join if the weather really stayed pleasant. They passed a bench where an older couple sat chatting animatedly about the sudden rain. Mike pointed out that people loved talking about weather, especially when it behaved unexpectedly. Sara remembered hearing a phrase, "unpredictable weather," meaning weather that seemed to change its mind every few minutes. Unpredictable was a word she liked. It didn't feel negative. It simply meant full of surprises. As they continued through the park, a light breeze swept through the trees, bending the branches gently. Sara mentioned that breeze meant soft, comfortable wind, the kind that felt relaxing rather than annoying. Mike laughed and added that strong wind, the kind that flipped umbrellas inside out, was his least favorite. They both laughed, remembering how many umbrellas they had broken in storms. Their walk brought back memories of different seasons. Sara described how much she adored autumn, especially when leaves turned bright shades of orange, red, and yellow. She loved feeling cool air on her face while walking under trees that looked like they had been painted by hand. Mike agreed that autumn was beautiful, though his heart still belonged to summer. He loved long days of sunshine, warm evenings, and the cheerful energy people seemed to have during that season. He asked Sara if she ever felt affected by winter. She nodded, admitting that long, cold months sometimes made her feel a bit under the weather, a phrase meaning she didn't feel well or felt low in energy. Mike told her that it was a common experience and that some people even felt sad when the days were too short or too dark. She had heard of that before, and it made sense. Sunlight had a way of lifting people's spirits. As they crossed a small bridge in the park, Sara noticed the sky changing once again. A patch of blue opened between the clouds, letting through gentle sunlight. Mike grinned, as if the sun were greeting him personally. Sara shook her head with mock disapproval, but even she had to admit the light felt nice. Their conversation shifted naturally, to how weather expressions often carry deeper meanings. Mike mentioned the phrase, "every cloud has a silver lining," explaining that it meant even disappointing situations had something positive hidden inside them. Sara appreciated that saying. It reminded her that difficult days sometimes brought unexpected lessons or kindness. Then she remembered another expression, "come rain or shine." She used it in a playful way, promising she would meet Mike for their beach trip, come rain or shine. They both laughed, knowing very well that if it actually rained, neither of them would go. Still, the expression carried a warmth that made her feel close to him, as if weather could be a symbol of loyalty. They continued walking, practicing small, simple sentences they might use with strangers. If someone complained, "it's so hot today," they practiced replying with sympathetic lines like, "I know, right? I can't wait to cool off later." If someone said "beautiful day," they practiced responding with "absolutely gorgeous" or "perfect weather today." The more they practiced, the more natural the patterns felt. Near the edge of the park, they found a small bench and sat down to rest. From there, they could see people walking dogs, couples sharing quiet conversations, and children splashing in puddles left behind by the earlier rain. Weather connected them all in a subtle way. Even the children jumping in puddles seemed to be speaking a universal language of joy after the storm. Mike pulled out his phone and checked the forecast again, laughing when he saw it predicted more sunshine later in the afternoon. Sara joked that the weather might still surprise them, but she appreciated the warmth of the moment. She told him that learning how to describe weather in English wasn't difficult, but using it naturally, like in their walk today, made the language come alive. For a moment, they sat quietly, simply watching the ever-changing sky. Sara felt a small sense of gratitude, realizing that even ordinary days held tiny lessons. Weather taught patience, flexibility, and awareness. It reminded her to slow down and look up at the sky once in a while. They left the park and walked toward the main street where the afternoon rhythm of the city had begun to pick up. Cars passed slowly over the still wet road, creating soft splashes that shimmered in the afternoon light. The sky, which had been a restless mix of gray and silver all morning, now showed broad strokes of blue. Sara lifted her face, feeling the gentle warmth of sunlight breaking through. She laughed softly, telling Mike that even she, someone who loved cloudy days, had to admit that a little sunshine felt wonderful. As they walked side by side, they continued exploring English expressions connected to weather without even realizing they were learning. Every comment, whether about the brightness of the sunlight or the faint smell of rain still clinging to the air, became a sentence they could imagine using in conversation. Mike joked that they were practically teaching a weather lesson just by living the day. Sara replied that that was the best way to learn, by paying attention to real experiences and turning them into language. Not far from the cafe they had visited earlier, they stopped near a row of small shops. One of the shopkeepers was standing outside, sweeping water off the sidewalk. He looked up at the sky and said cheerfully, "Crazy weather today, isn't it?" Without hesitation, both Sara and Mike responded naturally. Mike said, "Tell me about it." "We got caught in the rain earlier," Sara added, "but it looks like it's clearing up now." The shopkeeper nodded with a half smile and went back to sweeping. The moment lasted only a few seconds, but both of them felt a quiet sense of confidence. They had slipped into the exchange without effort, using simple phrases that felt comfortable and real. Further down the street, they passed a bus stop, where two women were talking loudly about the sudden rainstorm. One complained about forgetting her umbrella, and the other responded with a dramatic sigh, saying she was freezing because the wind had soaked her clothes. Sara whispered to Mike that complaining about weather might be the most universal way to bond with strangers. Mike agreed with a grin, adding that sometimes the fastest way to start a friendship was simply sharing the same small discomforts. They reached another cafe and decided to step inside for a short break. This one was brighter with large windows that let in the new sunlight. They ordered warm drinks and sat near the window where they could watch people passing by. Sara wrapped her hands around her cup and said she felt grateful for days like this, days that reminded her how small things like sunlight, rain, wind, or clouds could shape the rhythm of life. Their conversation deepened as they reflected on how weather could be a metaphor for emotions. Sunny days often symbolized happiness or clarity, while rainy days could reflect tiredness or introspection. Cold days brought stillness, and warm days carried energy. Mike mentioned that language often borrowed weather imagery to describe feelings. People could feel stormy inside or have a bright outlook or experience a fog of confusion. Sara added that even the phrase under the weather used physical weather to describe emotions or health. She looked outside again as a faint breeze brushed the leaves of a nearby tree. Weather changed constantly, she said, and maybe that was why people used it to begin conversations. It was gentle and personal, yet something everyone understood. You didn't need to know a person's life story to talk about the sky above you both. She felt that weather gave people a common ground, a place where understanding could begin. As the afternoon continued, more sunlight spilled across the tables in the cafe. Mike stretched his arms and joked that the day had transformed from depressing to delightful. Sara laughed, saying he sounded like a weather report himself. He pretended to deliver a forecast, predicting with mock seriousness that the next hour would bring increased happiness and a 100% chance of feeling energized. She rolled her eyes, but the playful moment made her smile widely. Eventually, they stood up to leave, stepping back outside where the final traces of rain had evaporated. The world looked refreshed, as if the morning gloom had been washed away. Sara took a slow breath and admitted that she felt lighter than she had when she first woke up. Mike nodded, saying that sometimes all it took was a little change in the weather and a good conversation to shift the mood of an entire day. As they walked toward the train station, Sara thought about everything they had discussed. She realized that learning English, especially through simple, familiar topics like weather, didn't have to feel overwhelming. It could be woven into daily life. It could appear in sunlight breaking through clouds, in a stranger's small complaint, in a shared prediction about rain, or in laughter over a broken umbrella. Weather wasn't just something to describe. It was a reminder to stay open, flexible, and connected. She turned to Mike and said that maybe the real lesson of the day had nothing to do with vocabulary and everything to do with awareness. Weather changed, people changed, feelings changed, and learning like weather was a constant movement, a gentle shifting of understanding from one moment to the next. By the time they reached the station, the sky glowed softly with late afternoon light. Sara felt grateful for the simplicity of the day and the quiet truths it had offered. She hoped that anyone listening to their story would feel encouraged to pay attention to the world outside their window and use it as a chance to practice English and to grow. Thank you for listening to this story on Learn English with Sara. If you enjoyed it, please remember to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment about what the weather is like where you are. Your support helps the channel grow, and I can't wait to see you in the next lesson.